Board of Commissioners informal work session for October 16th. It's 1:30, and thank you all for being here. We'll start with a work session, which we don't have, and so we'll move on to our treasurer, Mike Green. And Mike will give us a department update, and he's provided us with a packet here with summaries and all kinds of good stuff. Welcome, Mike. Thank you.
Welcome, Mike.
And sorry I missed your meeting. I was otherwise engaged.
We both did, didn't it? It was just Rick.
That's right, we made some good decisions.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I'll try to go over this fairly quickly, quite a bit to cover.
Sure.
But since you weren't there, if you do have questions you want to delve into more detail, please feel free. Basically, during the last quarter, the overall investment went up to $26.2 million. That's an increase over the prior quarter, and that's because you authorized additional spending. So I think we're spending about a little over 1.2, or investing, I should say spending, investing, 1.2 million. Earnings for the quarter, total earnings for LGIP and investments was $262,000. That's versus $169,000 for the same quarter last year. So we are up, and again, that's primarily due to the amount of investments and the amount of return on LGIP. We are getting a better return. On the investments themselves, both yield to maturity and yield to reverse were 13 plus basis points. So right now, yield to maturity, we're right now at 2.3. The goal was to try to get it above 2.0 at the end of the year, before they continue to see growth. The investment ceiling, as far as the scale, is continuing to be way under what the state treasurer's office mandate is. We're currently invested about 95% of the overall authorization, which is $27.5 million. And as far as average maturity and adjusted maturity, we continue to see that decline because the portfolio is aging. And new investments, I'm looking at shorter windows. So we're just going to see a general, at this point, a general decline in that every time I see you until we see something's changed. LGIP basically has remained unchanged. It's steady at 2.25%. I don't see that anything dramatic happening.
That's a long way up from 0.50.
Correct, correct. And it's been that way now for like the last 4 months, so I think we're pretty good. Overall, during the past month, or the past quarter since I saw you last, I bought 12 bonds. They averaged 3.8 years of maturity, and they had an average return of 3.31%. The bond market still was quite nice, especially in the 2.5 to 4 year range. Corporates are certainly the best. Muni bonds have sort of fallen off. Agency bonds are doing well, but you're paying a 6 to 12 month premium for the same rate of return. Under old business, core rate of inflation right now is at 2.7% for the last 12 months. One of the things we're trying to target is to ensure that new investments at least exceed the rate of inflation. The target is anticipated the next month will be 2.9%, which is the highest it's been in, I think, 10 years. So inflation is up, and it's not. I don't think it's going to change. Cash balances, we continue to track that on HHS. Overall, the county used in this last quarter quite a bit of cash. $1 million more went to investments, but they also went through about $4 million in additional things. Some of it are one-time hits. Some of it's due to year end and getting things in so I can do the next budget. But there was like over close to $1 million that went out to both SAFE and the self-insurance fund and things like that. There was $1.3 million that went to buses. Is that right? It was quite a bit of capital expenditure. So it was one of the biggest blips in a quarter that I had seen in any month. So I was just wanting to be aware of that, and that will come back a little bit later. Actually, probably 2 points down. The Leo report, I just presented that. It also showed a decline, but there's still over $22 million in monies that are in those 5 major funds, and that doesn't include solid waste. That's there that my gut reaction is budgeted but not spent. However, what that does lead us into, we don't have in your report, is maturity constraints. We had agreed to a formula that identifies how much money is available for investing and is tied to how much cash we have. Because of the dip in cash, that maturity formula basically says, the conservative end of it, is we are at that threshold at the present point. So it's right around 26.5, even though there's authorization to invest up to 27.5. So the investment committee basically recommended that for the time being, until we see that report, I adjust every month, but until we see that come back up, that any current investments just be held, not do any more investing unless we just have inventory bonds, which we'll have a couple in November, but that's it. So we're just gonna stay there. It's nice that we have that formula, it's a nice safeguard, and I'll continue to monitor it. But that wasn't in the report, that's there.
Excuse me, Mike, before we move on to the next one, the HHS cash balance, when you say it decreased by $1 million from the prior quarter?
Yes.
Is that spent down or invested?
No, it's down. It's just down.
Okay.
Okay. It's not invested. The investments really are reflected more in the general fund. This means that what their average cash balance is has stayed, and it's not, it should be so. I mean, they do have dips where they actually have to utilize cash, so it's not unforeseen. You know, they do have those vagaries in their overall budget with timing of money, I'm guessing with times of money coming in and year-end expenditures and so forth. So it's $1 million dip over 3 months.
They have to pay forward some of their contracts before they get reimbursed from the state.
Okay.
So it's not, we're not taking money from them to invest, that money's elsewhere. This is just a matter of their use of cash.
And they're usually carrying about $10 million in there.
They've been as high as 12, this is probably about as low as they go, and I would anticipate we'll start to see that swing in after this year. U.S. Bank, I'm going to continue to monitor, but I'm not going to report on it anymore unless something changes. But Mike has basically gotten the average cash balance down to about 1.2 million versus what used to average over 3. So that's just basically generating a nice positive additional earnings into the county. On the following bond rating, that's just the ones that are no longer AA rated. There's just a number of them, IBM, there are Canadian banks, there was one municipality. The only change there is 2 of the bonds, Bank of Montreal, actually got upgraded from A to back up to AA, so the actual percentage of the portfolio has shrunk as far as the bonds under, and no new bonds have been added. Under new business, where, unless anybody has any questions on just performance, new business is more where I'd like to spend some time. I attended an all-day seminar by the State Treasurer's Office last 3 weeks ago, sometime in my forecast. Very well done. First time they did it, it was to bring in all the municipalities and actually hear from their customer base, and a number of very good presentations were made, including the state economist, people that are heading up the funds, and so forth. What came out of that was, and I need to preface this, the state economist says he generally gets it right 100% of the time after the fact. So he said economists aren't known for their predictability, looking forward. But there is a general, their basic feeling for Oregon and for national, federal, is that we're going to begin to see a downturn, not dramatic, in bond rates and the economy in the latter half of 2019. And there was a myriad of reasons, but there were 3 that were key. One is the spending bill that Congress passed has been spent, and there's nothing on the horizon for subsequent spending bill. So that money's gone. That's stimulus. Secondly, which you probably heard about in the paper today, but they predicted several weeks ago, is the tax reform basically is going to provide less revenue for the federal government, so they're going to have less revenue to spend. And that's already came out in the papers about the amount of new debt that we have. Third, which I found very surprising, is what has helped stimulate the economy is the influx of employment. And the employment rate has gone down, more people are getting jobs, more money is into the pipeline. Well, good news is we're, relatively speaking, at what they consider 0 unemployment. The bad news is what typically stimulates continued growth is the young people entering into the bottom of the workforce. At least from what they can tell, the millennials have no interest in entering at the entry levels of the workforce.
except for this one.
So that employment stimulus, they do not see. And without that kind of increase, what they're basically saying, the consequence of those events are going to cause the economy to slow down. What that means as far as us is they believe the bond market will be stable, but it's not going to continue to, interest rates aren't going to continue to grow. So what does all this mean? It means, what I brought to the investment committee is, do we need to begin looking at a strategy to take advantage, if that's correct, of a more assured rate of return? I know I'm spending a lot of time, but this is where I walked away with. So planning for the middle of 2019 and further out, what can we do to ensure that we get the best rate of return? Okay. What came out of it was really three things. One is, near term, is the Oregon Intermediate Fund, which is approved in our investment policy, but we've never acted on it, is currently generating a little over 2.9%. So it's about 75 basis points better than LGIP. And I'll get back to that as far as the recommendation. So one thing is we can get a better return than LGIP on a, quote, different money market, if we wish. Second is, do we want to, quote, stabilize our investments by putting, if we can, putting more investments beyond 5 years. Now, the 5 years right now doesn't provide a significant benefit, and I would say in normal circumstances, I wouldn't do that. We're talking about a 6-year bond, 7-year bond generating maybe 15 to 25 basis points better than a 4-year bond. However, what it does do, if we go further out, is it gives that stability of that rate of return for a longer period. So the second arm of that strategy is to see if we can identify more monies to consider investing at a longer term. And so those are the two strategies that we're looking at. What that comes back to is, in reference back to that legal report, is there a way in which we can work with those 5 major fund groups to identify some of those monies that they have no intention of spending in the near term? If we can, then that opens that window up and gives us an opportunity to put those monies out at a better rate, or a more secure rate of return for a longer period. So those are the two strategies we came up with. The last one was just a matter at the portfolio. If you look at rate of return right now, banks for investment are the place to be, corporate banks. New Zealand, Australia are a wonderful place to be, unless you want to really go out to Brazil, which is a great return, but an unstable environment. After Australia, New Zealand, it's Canadian banks, and after Canadian banks, it's Wells Fargo, Barclays, a couple banks, JP Morgan. But they're all paying for corporate. They're paying the New Zealand, Australia banks are paying probably 40 basis points better over the same period than Canadian and U.S. banks. Canadian are paying slightly better than U.S. banks. U.S. banks are paying better than corporate. From what I can tell, what concerns me there is if you look at those 3 sectors, Australia and New Zealand, of the 3, are the least regulated. So my gut reaction is we have plenty there, and it was agreed by the investment committee that we don't necessarily, even though it's paying better, put any more there. We just let that portion of the portfolio mature. So what we looked at was primarily saying, let's continue to look at banks. Let's look at both the Canadian and the U.S. banks. Let's not try to put too much in any one particular bank. Let's not invest in banks, but let's be a little bit more circumspect on those investments. So that was kind of the 3 legs of what we came up with as an investment strategy. So I think it makes sense. I think we can I'd like to see us basically as a county look at all three as a strategy going forward, and this is really into next year. So that's, I guess I would stop now and see if anybody has any questions that make sense to this group. Am I missing the boat somewhere?
So do you need this, do you need any board actions?
I do. I'll get to that. That was where I was
I
going to.
just, given that you were saying that you see a softening in the markets.
Right.
Coming mid-2019.
Correct.
Which then would probably translate to a rise in bond rates.
Their prognosis is it will not. It's actually, that seems to be the logical conclusion, but their feeling is that it won't. It's actually what their prognostication was, that's why I was concerned about looking further out, is that the bond rates will probably, in the latter half of 19, will probably dip about 10 to 20 basis points over where they are today.
Really?
That's their feeling. I think they're basically looking at more money being parked here and not being as competitive. Not, that was just their, that's why, if I saw the bond rates going up, there's no point in at this point, going further out.
Yeah.
And their comment is the bond market has already reflects all of the anticipated rate increases that the Fed has announced through the first quarter of next year. So it's already in the price structure as we see it now.
For the first quarter.
Yes, for the December, and they're expecting another increase in December, another after the first of the year. That bond market, unless the Feds actually raise it at a higher rate or do more, that the bond market right now, as we see it, is reflecting those anticipated hikes. So all their comment is they're seeing the economy begin to slow down. They're basically thinking the bond market is going to stay very stable, but they don't see that the rate of return is going to continue to go up even if the Fed hikes. That's their prognostication.
Well, I don't want to see us start extending the life of the bonds that we're purchasing if in fact we don't anticipate that bond rate improving to a significant degree. So, that's the thing I would like to monitor.
Yeah. At this point, where we're at is, I am capped at what I can invest beyond 5 years anyway. And I am looking at taking advantage of probably in the 5 to 6.5 year range because I can pick up about 20, 30 basis points on that, and I think it gives us some stability. The question I would have is not that we aggressively pursue it, but if we can identify monies that fall within that category of investment possibility, then it gives us the option. So part of what we're recommending is, within those 5 funds, is there a way over the next few months to clearly identify whether it's nuts, there's nothing there, and that's the end of the discussion, or there is an opportunity, and what is that opportunity, and then be able to say, we can go as high as if we so desire, then it would be recommendation by the investment committee and approved by the board of commissioners to make that decision. So what I'm looking for is a strategy that says, yes, that's a good strategy, let's take some action items to be able to implement it if we so desire, as opposed to reacting, let's be proactive, if that prognosis is true.
And I don't have a problem with that. And your track record is such that you've been doing a great job in producing return. And those are questions that come to mind as you do the report. And I'm just watching those changing markets. And, the market was up 545 points today. I mean, it's crazy times out there. And the 800-point drop the other day. You got to go, oh, wait a minute.
So any other just general questions on that strategy?
Just real quickly, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but there are some murmurings at the state level with the state economist and nationally that 2020 will be a significantly harder recession, perhaps equaling or exceeding 2008.
I didn't get from the state economist that it was going to be. I think they're going to see it. I think you're going to see it from what he identified. You're going to see a downturn in the economy. There's no question about that. Whether he never used the word recession in his remarks. And he had just made that same presentation 3 days before to the governor. His comment was the governor didn't appreciate his prognostication because I think she wanted to see a more upscale economy and more money in which to have available. But he didn't say that. He's basically saying they're just going to, we have been in a good economic market now for, 8 years, 10 years? It's been on an upswing, and we're seeing some things that we know. Unemployment, part of what also stimulates the economy is housing. The problem with housing is everybody in the housing industry is overwhelmed with business, but there are no new people coming in to help create more housing opportunity. Or, now I'm getting way out of here, but one of the things with Oregon, and that's what they talked about as well, is Oregon is a migrant state. It is attractive, particularly to the Midwest, and that's an influx of people coming in from other parts of the country. So if you go to the Northeast, they're migrating to the Southeast. But if you go to the Midwest, they're going a little bit south, but they're also coming in this direction. And what makes that attractive are jobs and affordable housing. The housing market there's not a lot of affordable housing. They're building as much as they can, but the demand is exceeding supply, and there is no new construction people entering into that market with any degree of any large amounts. So you're not going to see that. So you're going to see the cost of housing continue to go, which makes people moving into this area more difficult. His comment was, what's nice about Oregon is that nobody doesn't want to come to Oregon, except those. The only place that we actually have a negative migration, I hate to say it, Washington. We actually have a net negative migration for people from Oregon to Washington versus the other way. The other which surprised me is Idaho is neutral. But every place else we're positive. We have more people coming in than going out. So those are parts of the things that they brought up. So do they anticipate a downswing in the economy? Absolutely. And I think we're going to begin to see it.
So in the interest of time, is there something that we need to be?
Yes, ma'am. That's where I'm going to go
doing
right
as a
now.
board?
Yes, there is, in your packet, there is asking you to allow me, it's already been approved in the investment policy. So what I'm asking you to do is, it's a memo to you from me, asking you to allow me to formally open up an OLGIF account, intermediate fund account. What you have to be aware of, and they made it very clear, it's like a mutual fund. You can lose money. Now, we can also lose money elsewhere, but you can lose money. It's liquid from the standpoint that we can withdraw money monthly, once a month at the end of the month. But that's the key, is that they want to make it very certain, and the Board of Commissioners has to, in this case, in no uncertain terms, recognize, read the pamphlet, and acknowledge that they understand that this fund can lose money. If the Board of Commissioners is uncomfortable with that, then there's no point in proceedings. But it needs to be formally approved, board order, minutized, or whatever the right term is.
Board order, I think we've got a resolution and a order.
And so all we're recommending at this point is that we formally establish the fund, or the investment opportunity, that we move some money into it at this point in this fourth quarter, $300,000, and that we sit there and continue to monitor it and look at it as a part of our investment strategy that gets a better rate of return. Consider it to be a LGIP on steroids, and look at it from that perspective and try to move more money into that if we feel comfortable over time.
The discussion around the table from the investment committee was, who recommended that we do this, was the fact that we knew it was a risk. We took the risk of losing money, but given the fact that at the end of the month, every 30 days, we can take any or all money out of that account to minimize our loss, the investment committee thought it was a good idea to go ahead and open that account.
When we talked about it back when this came available to us, and it was the risk reward, the aspect of it. and the difference between what we were earning in the LGIP and our pool of bonds didn't make it.
Didn't make any sense at that
Didn't
time.
make any sense.
And there wasn't a good enough track record for it at that time either.
Correct. So, opening the account, having its availability, I have no problem with doing that. I just think we need to be very cognizant and cautious that it has to produce at a rate that makes the risk significant enough.
Agreed. I agree wholeheartedly with you. And where they're at now is they have a little over $20 million in the fund. It is managed by an outside third party. It does conform to the state investment guidelines, not our guidelines are more restrictive. So they do have some bonds that are triple B, but 70% of what they currently are invested in are treasuries. And their investment window is typically 1 to 5 years.
Now, if they bought some junk bonds, I'd be all over it.
Okay. Well,
So Mike,
So, yes.
when you first brought this up to all of us, and my takeaway from that was that we wanted to consider this an option. We wanted to know that we had the authority to
Right.
go ahead and consider this as
Yes.
just another option. And is
Correct.
that what you're asking us
What
now?
I'm
Or do
asking
you want
is-
to actually open the account?
Actually open the account.
And this says that the minimum is 500,000.
It does, but I double checked because that's what was there in the pamphlet.
Mhm.
And when they had the seminar, there was a mention no minimum investment. So I put an email into Tom Lofton in the State Treasurer's office. He got back to me and said that they have to update the pamphlet, that there is no longer a minimum.
So where did you come up with the 300,000?
That was the amount that the investment committee recommended that we look to part into it over the next, for the latter half of this year and then revisit it in January. So they wanted to, they recommended opening an account, but they wanted to put a maximum amount on it for now, for the rest of this calendar year. And so that was the number that they recommended.
So is that what you're asking us to authorize then at
Yes.
this point?
I'm asking twofold. One is to authorize the formal opening of the account, acknowledge in your minutes that, you know, it's risky,
We understand.
and allow up to $300,000 to be invested in it over the remaining year of this calendar year.
Does the board want to make that one motion or one item? Or do we want to just move all of those to the consent agenda or just change, or
I think it
change?
should be
each-
one motion.
I think it could be one motion that we open the account and authorize the treasurer to invest 300,000.
And that we
And
acknowledge
up to
that
it.
there's
Yeah, we
loss.
acknowledge, right, we acknowledge.
Up to at this point.
Up to the 300,000.
We also need the board to acknowledge that they've read
And acknowledge the fact that we understand this is,
The loss.
there is a
Yeah.
risk.
This language needs to be
Yeah.
expressly in the minutes,
In the minutes.
exactly as it's written.
Can you do a formal resolution for this?
A board order?
Yes.
We can bring that to
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
Thursday.
So we can approve the board order.
That we have it written in
Like our
Yeah.
investment
order
policy
format.
was reviewed by the short-term fund board originally?
Yes.
Yeah.
We, last year in April, I think is the last time we updated the investment policy. And at that point in time, we agreed to put this as an investment option.
Right.
So it's in there, so that we already took care of that step. Now it's just a matter of, at that point, it was not doing a good rate of return. I think it was actually doing about 57 basis points or something like that. We said it's not even, why even consider it? What they have now is more money invested, a much longer track record, and a much better rate of return. So,
Okay, is that, can we?
That's fine. I think
Consent?
It works.
Okay.
Legal counsel can lead
All right.
it.
So we
All right.
will just,
We can leave it some more.
And if the board would be sure that they've read the
The
pamphlet
pamphlet.
prior to Thursday.
we will-
Last time, didn't
we will indicate that you are whether
And keep in mind, if you need more time, take more time. It's not as if, you know, there's an opportunity out here we're gonna miss. It's just a matter of if you would like to take it, prefer for another week.
we?
or-
We had it last time.
300,000
And we
is
read it
what
last
percent
time,
of our
from what I
overall
remember.
investment portfolio.
Okay.
I mean, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but it is a small percentage of our overall investment portfolio. And consequently, it does give us an opportunity to enter into a fund that does give us some flexibility and some freedom, so I have no problem.
Thank you, Mike.
And you might consider this.
Thanks, Mike.
On Thursday this week.
Yes.
Thursday.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, we'll move on to the preliminary consent agenda.
Could I just ask Ken a
Yes.
question first? Did Mike Barnhart do whatever he needed to do in terms of the count? You had indicated he wanted to just double check some things about the, what's it called? Yeah.
Until there's
He's-
nothing that needs to be
He's
done.
good, yeah.
I have one form, just a matter of, there's no point going forward until we have.
Sure, okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Mike.
I just want to make sure we have finance manager's thumbs up on it
Okay.
as well for you.
And the preliminary consent agenda, if everybody has had a chance to take a look at these items in the folder and have any questions about any of them, anyone that you'd like to remove from the preliminary consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I'm not so sure I want to actually remove it. I guess it's more of a question of clarification on the number 4, the adoption of the YCT Transit Development Plan effective October 18th. I know there were going to be some people that I heard that are going to be there to provide comments on the final plan on Thursday. And if we approve it the way it is right now, I'd really like to understand a little bit about how the process is. And these are basically manufacturers and educators from the education that would like to see that part beefed up a little bit, how we go about amending it after we approve it, what process we go through if we decide it needs amending.
So we should then probably take it off the consent agenda, move it to the non-consent agenda, if you want a discussion on it, because we have to do that anyway, right?
Well, if you recall, when we set up our new procedures, any board member at the beginning of formal session can ask for a consent agenda item to be removed. So you could do that on Thursday if it looks like you have people who want to comment on this.
But did you also have some comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, I'll have a couple, but I was going to do it Thursday and if we remove it from the.
Do you want to
from the
remove it
plan.
now?
Yes, I'd like to remove it.
If you think you're going to, we might as well
Okay, I'd
do it
like to
now.
remove it now and schedule it for Thursday's formal meeting.
And you'll also have the transit board of directors at 9:30 to also have
Discussion.
testimony and discussion as well. We're having both bodies consider this.
So do you know if your interested people are going to be coming to YCTA at 9:30?
They weren't planning, they were planning on coming to the formal.
So do you want to have them come to the YCTA instead, or? as
I
a-
can try to get home, but if, I'm trying to think, I guess, if we put it on the YCTA meeting and they don't show up, can we then table it to the formal?
You can,
I'd rather be on the formal agenda, I guess.
you can do it at both. You can adopt it at the YCTA and then at the board
Oh, that's right,
session.
because it's where they
Yeah, it's
authorized.
not gonna
Okay,
be
that-
here unless it's done.
That's what I
YCTA.
recommend we do, put it on.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then we'll just
Sure.
Just keep
consider.
in mind though, if you adopt it at YCTA and then revise it at the
It
commissioner's
has to
level,
go
then
back
you
to
have to go back.
YCTA.
And
That could
that's
be a
why,
problem.
yeah.
When we need to get this thing done.
This week.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because we're moving.
And that's why I said I'm not opposed at all to so we can get moving along of approving it, but I want to know
Yes.
what process we can go through to amend it.
Moving
At a
forward,
later
if
time.
we judge that there is weaknesses and things that we need to do, we can certainly do that. It's within our purview to do that. But I think we need to get this finalized so we can act on it formally at our meeting, so we can move forward with YCTA establishing, because this has to be established by when?
And it is in October.
Well, there isn't really a deadline. Well, the consultants are finished the end of October, so if there's any changes and they want to make it to the documents, they're done with their.
Okay, well, then what I'd recommend is we leave it on the consent agenda for today, and then if they show up Thursday, even though we've approved it, they could still provide
They can
input that we
provide
can look at for
input, and we
future.
can certainly take a look as we go down the road and see where, if any, there are weaknesses and how we judge would be the best way to address those.
Yeah, because then I can
That's
still make
within-
comments Thursday, but we can approve it on the consent agenda today.
I would
Okay, well, then we can leave it on the consent
So
agenda.
let's leave it on the consent agenda, and then we'll move along to non-consent agenda items under item D1. which is consideration of the designation of 2 seats of the Antrim County Transit Advisory Committee, YCTAC, Workforce and/or Education, CTE.
I asked last Thursday when Commissioner Prinsip wasn't here to have that removed for discussion, because I believe that even though we had a lot of input, that a lot of our manufacturers and education as it represents CTE were not really well, the ones that have looked at the transit plan did not have a lot of input into the transit plan, especially from our manufacturers and future routing and technology and everything. So I thought what I would like to do is discuss this to see, since we're not limited to what we put on the board, of adding 2 more positions of that whole list, that we can add optional list, that we add those 2 positions, and then we determine how we're gonna fill those.
Commissioner, I had
Sure.
a question though. The manufacturers that expressed concern about not being represented, can you share who they would be?
They were ones that belonged to MEDP and are MEDP customers, and just to give you an example, one of their concerns was, as they looked through the future plans, is, as everybody knows, we're adding almost 1,000 units of quote-unquote affordable housing, whatever that is, out off Hill Road and Baker Creek. And right now, there's 47 acres that are in the process of beginning development in our industrial park for 2 large developments. So as they looked at that and they said, okay, they want to use transit as much as possible, but there isn't anything designated. One thing, there wasn't anything designated that goes like directly from the northwest side to the industrial area. Like, we don't even have a route set up to go to the industrial area. So the only way they can get there is to go downtown, transfer, and then go out onto Lafayette Avenue. And that's about 40 minutes to 45 minutes. So they were concerned about that.
So is that because at this particular point, there is no employer and there are no actual residents?
Well, they're building the residence now, and they're getting ready to start the development of all the properties.
So we don't have a route there now because there's no need for a route there now, but if we talked about when either the industrial was in and the residential was in, then there would be a need, but it doesn't seem like there's
Well,
one.
I think myself personally, I think there's a need now, because we have Ferrum Technologies now, we have world-class technologies. Oregon Lithoprint is now relocated out there. What's the name, the one that does all the metal work that's growing leaps and bounds, that does the custom metal work.
Yeah.
They're out there, so we're adding a lot of jobs.
Who was that? Solid Farm?
Yeah, Solid Farm, we're adding a lot of jobs out there, but they really can't take advantage of transit because there's no way to get from where they are without coming down to the transit area. So that was one thing. That was a concern of them, and I don't know where that
Was that
fits in.
looked at in the plan?
Yes.
But it's later, like on the
It's in the
long
long
term.
term.
Yeah.
Very long term.
It's in
So
the
they
long
were,
term.
And
I don't think they feel we can wait that long if we really want to use transit.
And the bottom line is that the plan is, as things set now, here are our immediate, here are our midterm, here are our long-term. There's nothing to keep us from adjusting that as we look at the needs and as they develop, fill the needs as they present themselves. If that housing project moves forward,
Which
and
it
those
is.
are developed, and they are in fact workforce housing,
Yeah.
or low income,
Which they
or
are.
affordable, then that will be the time we say, okay, wait a minute, we have to adjust our routing or add a route.
Well, yeah, I don't have any problem with that,
And I
Commissioner.
think our YCTA board is on board enough with all of the segments of our population.
See, I guess that's just my opinion. I
Yeah.
don't think we have we have the elderly, the disabled, we have our providers, we have citizens, those 5 words that were required to have that by statute that the state requires us to have. But if you look at all the other areas, I think from the get-go, so we don't wait until that need arises and then appoint somebody, I think from the get-go, we need those 2 positions filled on the board.
I think we've sort of evolved into a culture where unless you are a particular targeted group, either a minority or a particular subgroup or subpopulation, you can't possibly empathize with the needs of that. we've segmented ourselves into hyphenated populations where I can possibly represent the needs of low-income housing or women who have been, victims of domestic violence. And I think that's sort of a misconception. I think that the representation that we have built into this board can certainly be conversant with the needs of, we've got housing development, we've got jobs here, we can connect those, and I believe that this, the good thing about surface transportation as opposed to fixed, to light rail, to fixed, rail, is that you can move routes around, you can move people around, and I don't think we can't empathize and understand and come up with a solution unless we're a member of that group. I think we've gotten to the place where we're just, I can't possibly care enough unless I'm that,
Yeah,
unless
well,
I'm that person.
I guess, Madam Chair, it goes back to I tabled way back a year and a half ago now, had our first strategic doing we had out at the Falls. I tabled one on transportation, and that was the second highest need that was identified at that table was transportation for workforce and manufacturers. And that was the highest thing, and yet, since that was identified as one of the things that our first strategic doing, everything's been developed without any of that taken into consideration, other than long-term routing changes. So I just think it's, myself personally, of course, and this is just my feeling, I think to add 2 more people, that it's a big sector, especially when you talk about what's going on in CTE and how we get high school students that are internships out to our manufacturers, how we get them back to school, how we do all that. I think that's very critical that both education and manufacturers have a say or input into that. But again, that's just what I like to see done.
Commissioner?
Well, personally, I don't judge we need to add to this board at this point in time. I think we can do the job that's required by that transit board with the members. I look at the people who Cynthia's gone out and gotten to serve, and they do represent a broad spectrum of our community. And I am sitting on that board as the liaison from the board. I recognize what Commissioner Olson's addressing. I think it's absolutely critical that we keep in mind the evolution of our community and the needs as that happens, and that we're ready to step in and address them, and not just wait until it happens to do it, but to watch as this develops. Just as this development goes forward out off Baker Creek Road, right now it's a pile of dirt, but what's going to be there? So you're talking about the north side of
No, they're
Baker.
putting curbs, they're starting putting in new foundations next
That
week.
development, if you're going on Baker Creek,
Uh-huh.
the development on the left is not going to be the affordable housing. That's over on the.
A lot of it to the left is it's gonna be some duplexes, some condominiums towards Hill Road going to R2 families back to R1 families.
But the.
On the left, yeah, where they're put
The
the
part
streets
on the
in now.
right where they're doing.
That's also gonna be worked out, that hasn't been built. But the part that's in development now with the streets is gonna be
Those-
R4, R2, and R1. Multifamily and single family.
Right, but
So-
the single-family dwellings out there are going to be in the $300,000.
To the back side.
And the multiple.
Right.
So.
But anyway, I mean, it's
The bottom line is.
it's all a multi-use
yeah,
development.
The bottom line is, as those start to
Mhm.
develop and the needs present themselves, we need to be ready to make that move. And I think our board, I know that Ken Moore, for instance, has agreed to serve on it.
Mhm.
He's very broad in his scope as to what the community needs and wants. And I think that we can represent.
Well, now that we've had the discussion, that's all I wanted to do is today have discussion. I still want to be able to allow people Thursday, if they represent those areas, to put in their input.
Yeah.
But as long as we've had the discussion, I'm satisfied.
And just one
Not that I
other thing.
agree, but I'm satisfied.
Okay, thank you. And Cynthia, just if you, for a second, just a question. I think just as a refresher, if you could just again, demonstrate, if you would, who's on the board and what they represent, just sort of, off the top of your head without, just so that we can, yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I know. Just looking at it, where'd it go? When I was doing this, I was trying to think of, you'll notice a lot of them have dual roles because I think they could represent both. So Frank Sheridan, obviously, he's a local government and could represent small cities, but he's also over 65 and is from a low-income area as well. Scott Essen, Newburgh, local government, and a larger city of Yamhill. Emily Fry, she works with people with disabilities, works for the county, and is also a provider, which is one of our requirements, that we had to have a provider, or some providers. Craig Johnson, transit user and a person with a disability. Nancy Kime actually asked to be on the committee. I didn't actually have her on my original list, but she really wanted to be, and she represents both seniors and people with disabilities. Christy Long works for Northwest Senior Disabled Services, and so primarily would represent individuals 65 and older, but she also sat on the project advisory committee, so I think she brings some other representation as well. Chris Mercer from the tribal counselor. I see that, I thought he would be a good representative because they, not because the casino is an employer and a destination.
But he doesn't represent the casino.
No, he doesn't, but he would be knowledgeable about possibly, or could get that information. I mean, a better person might be Kim, but he's too busy. He's the one I work with.
So he'd basically be the tribal.
Yeah, tribal. We aren't required to have a tribal representative, but
No, but they're during the part.
but he's just been
When you
involved
wanna go
and
for
is
grants,
very
you wanna have
knowledgeable
the tribe on your team.
about a lot of transportation issues. Ken Moore, obviously, from Yamhill, small cities, and he's also over 65. And I think Heather Richards might address what you were talking about. She's the planning director and
Yeah, I discussed that with him.
pretty knowledgeable about what's
Friday.
coming up. And we did look at those areas, and we did ask quite every time we had a meeting, we asked, well, does anybody know about any new development and where it's going to be? And as best we could to try to address that it would be included.
I'm surprised Heather didn't address all of this, 'cause now that we have that huge opportunity zone.
Not that she didn't bring it up, she
Yeah.
did, but I
They
think
haven't
she
even-
could represent that
They
as well.
still haven't figured out how this opportunity zone's gonna work yet, though.
Yeah, there's a class, I think, next week on it, but it's a huge opportunity.
The rules have not been established.
I know what that's to say.
So it's pretty hard to develop a nice plan when you don't know what the rules are gonna be.
Yeah, I was just happy they at least put one in, even though they don't know.
And then Mike Schmidt, he's also service provider and works with people with disabilities, and then Ken Oak West from Willamina. It's a low-income community in a small city. I did try to get Gerardo Ochoa from Bloomfield College, and I actually went and met with him personally, called and followed up, because I thought he would be a good person to represent education, but he doesn't live in Yamhill County, and he didn't feel comfortable. And then I reached out to Unidos to see if anybody from there, and
Okay.
that's,
Now, does that, now, I've looked at a couple of, that takes up all 11 spots
yes,
now that are in our bylaws, right?
yes.
We've got a committee of 11 people, and I think that, you could go on and on and on and say, well, we don't have every single possible interest represented on a committee, and we all know what it's like to try to get something done by a committee. It seems like it just gets a little bit more, cumbersome when you've got more. But I think we've had a good discussion, and your points are well taken. I think we can talk about this on Thursday and see where we go with folks who come
And that's
in.
fine, that's fine
And
with me.
let's do that.
Because without
So thank
Stan
you.
being here Thursday, I just wanted to
Yeah.
have the conversation.
I appreciate that. Okay, thank you, Cynthia.
So you want
Thank
just
you.
a couple
questions
agenda?
for you, Cynthia? I will figure it
So
out
we'll
so
keep
you
it on the
guys-
non-consent,
Yeah,
okay? All right,
in the future.
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll
Thanks,
just
Cynthia.
talk more about
Hey,
this on
good
Thursday.
job for the consultants.
Remember, of course, that's the Great American Shakeout, so we'll talk fast.
What?
And we have no executive session, so we've got a few minutes if we can do some commissioner updates, and we'll start with
Second item
you,
under
Commissioner
D.
Olson.
You forgot.
No, I
Yes, second item.
forgot
Like
one.
one item.
Did you want me
Oh,
hold that over to next week?
Oh, yeah, there's no urgency, is it?
No.
Do you wanna wait?
Sure.
Or we could have a discussion, or we could wait.
I think there's not an urgency, I can
Okay.
wait. And then you were gonna make a comment on number 3.
Where are we? Oh, thank you for reminding me. I just
Before you
wanted,
adjourn.
yeah, I wanted to, just for the record, I don't know if anyone remembers that we went through this process, it seems like such a long time ago. But when, Ken Hopper, was offered the position, he did agree, or he did suggest that he would take less than the advertised rate of compensation. The increase was going to be 4%, I believe, every year
Yeah, for the first
going
3
forward.
years.
For 4 years.
For 4 years.
That's still, by my calculations, and correct me if I'm wrong, brings him up short at the end of 4 years, when you consider that the market adjustments are going to continue on above and beyond in the comps, more than his compensation going into it. So I just think we should acknowledge that he is going to be compensated less than the original offer, and is going to still be, with those increases, going to be below.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I had this conversation with Ken last week, and personally, I thought he was being more than gracious. Because I suggested to Ken last week, I thought 5% was not even get him where he would belong after 4 years. And then plus, not knowing the exact salary range of our new business services director is going to be, which would be close to Ken or maybe a little below Ken's, what he's doing now, I don't know, but I think we're gonna save some money that way. I approve this way, thanks to Ken, but I think with the cost of living increase, which you'll get anyway, but I think 4% myself was a little bit low, but
We can revisit this perhaps after the first year. Is
I
there-
would, yes, definitely.
And
like
then
to
we
do
can
that.
look at that 4%, and I know we're signing a contract now, but there's nothing that says that we as a board can't, as we get, now that 4% doesn't automatically kick in, or do we have to have some board action before we do
No,
that?
I think
It'll-
it was called out.
It will
in
be
the contract for
automatic.
the first
But you can
7
always
years.
adjust it.
And
if you
Madam Chair,
choose
what
to.
I would recommend, since it's in his contract also, and Ken and I talked about every December, in his contract, we do have to provide him a valuation, that at that time, for the next year, we look at that time his performance and decide if it needs a increase.
It's a good idea.
And I would also point out, because in that same subsection, because there is the 4% increase, there is the evaluation
Mhm.
piece each year. But then there's also guidance about having HR also look at a market or look at where those positions are. That is written into the contract.
Yeah, so I think between that, having HR look at it, between his evaluation and everything, I think we'd be in a good position to make any changes if we need to make them.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
I'm just fine with paying Ken what he earns.
That's right.
Wait a minute,
I
let me
plan
get
on-
into my wallet.
I plan on earning
We
everything.
don't
I think he's earned next year's salary already.
Yeah, we don't have enough money to pay him what he earns.
That's right.
So Commissioner, do you want to give us a?
Well, nor, not anything big, and because of the time constraints on my two fellow commissioners going to meetings, I'll skip today.
Okay, Commissioner?
Yeah, I just, as you know, I was in DC last week. It was an extremely strong meeting. We were at the White House all day, got to meet with Secretary Zinke from the Secretary of Interior. Very, very good conversation. The thing I was very upset about, his family and John Phelan's family are good friends, and they have played together quite often, and I had forgotten that when I was with him.
Oh.
To bring that forward, because they've been hunting together and snowboarding
Really?
and
That's
stuff.
interesting.
So but anyway, then I did meet with the Undersecretary for Benefits for Veterans Affairs, and that was good. They've got some really good things coming down. I think the most important part of the meeting was that Britt, the young lady who organized this whole thing, is with the White House intergovernmental office and gave us a list, which I have shared with the chair, of a list of email addresses for every department and agency, and made the commitment that if we were to send an email to one of those addresses and didn't get a response within 48 hours, to send an email to her and we would get a response.
Could we get somebody here to do that at the state?
You know, one
Sure,
of the
no,
comments
we'll
that was
probably
made,
do it.
because
Because you can't get a response from the state.
the Department of Transportation representative was there, one of the undersecretaries, and there's a bucket of money out of the $1 trillion infrastructure that is going to be distributed to the states, no strings attached, no matches necessary, but it's being given to the governor for discretion.
Wow.
And the comment was,
So much for that.
How much for that?
can we
Bucket.
please bypass the governor of
Small
Oregon
bucket.
in this?
That's
That
a
was,
small
that statement
bucket.
was made. That
Did you
statement
say
was
that?
made. I did not. It was somebody sitting right behind me.
But you were thinking it.
Oh,
Well, I'm sure they were all thinking
There was
that.
total agreement when that statement was made. But the thing that probably was the most greatest part of that visit was my face-to-face with Vice President Pence. And he came in the room unexpectedly. We were meeting, and all of a sudden these two Secret Service guys were standing there and looking around, and then in comes Vice President Pence, and just really, really pumping everybody with the fact that this administration is committed to local electeds doing the job. That they're the ones who make the decisions, and that's why we were there. And it was really good. But on my way to DC, I was in Minneapolis when one of the 40 soldiers whose remains had been returned from North Korea had been identified. And as I was waiting for my flight on in Minneapolis, the plane arrived with the remains of this soldier, and the honor guard down on the tarmac, the Hirsch, the family there waiting for this person. It was, after all these years, it was really neat, the honor guard moving that casket across to that hearse, the family there. As I was relaying this story to Vice President Pence, I had him, we were face to face, it was really neat. And he started tearing up, and it was really special. And I just asked him if he would please tell President Trump how much I, as a veteran, appreciated that was an integral part of what he asked for from North Korea, and that happened. So that was really neat. But there were a lot of good things came out of this meeting, and they will be coming forward. AOC was well represented, and
How many ended up going back there, Stan?
we ended up with 11
Wow.
from Association of Oregon Counties, and it was solid. But you really got the sense that they meant it. They wanted us there. They wanted to hear from us, and they wanted us to be a part of the move forward. So anyway,
Would
that's
have happened before.
Pardon?
Would have happened before.
Thank you for that update. I've got some stuff I'm gonna hang on to next week, and you've got a meeting, I've got a meeting. Anything else for the good of the order?
Just
All
one
God's
thing I
children got
forgot. I'm
meeting.
gonna be asking, well, we'll discuss it next week after I kind of did a faux pas. I was told I did a faux pas the other day by our wonderful, illustrious chair, that
Oops.
sometime, our wonderful, illustrious chair, that sometime in November I'd like to schedule an actual work session to talk about smart metering. I've let Senator Boquist and Representative Noble know about the issue, and it caught them both by total surprise. But then you have to register with OPUC, who it's appointed by. So, but anyway, so Senator Boquist is working with some of his other senators to see if they were aware how big of an issue this is to rural residents, and So probably sometime in November, I'll ask Laura to put that on for a discussion.
All right, good deal. All right,
Okay.
if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn today's informal session. Thank you all.
Okay.